Welcome to this week's installment of Reading with Robin, your number one destination since 2002 for insightful author interviews and discussions on everything literary. And with no further introduction, your host, Robin Call.
By Allison Dickson. It's her domestic suspense debut. Do I need to hear anything other than that? Keep your friends close and your neighbors closer. I am so excited to speak with Allison. The book came out just a few weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I just soaked it up, sucked it down, couldn't put it down, and I was so excited to be able to get on the phone and chat with her. Welcome to Reading with Robin. Allison.
Oh, thank you so much, Robin. It's awesome to be here.
Well, I am so excited. When this book came, I was like, domestic suspense, thriller, those are like my new favorites.
Yeah.
So I've been denied for so long that I just can't get enough. And when this book arrived, and I could, you could tell by the cover it's going to be a good one, I was so excited. And I think I just sat down with it. I sent an email to your publicist, Katie, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm loving this book. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The whole experience has just been such a surreal whirlwind and really it just seems to keep getting better and better. So people seem to be really liking it, and it just feels so good to be at this point. It was a long road.
Yes, talk about that long road. What was the publishing journey for this, and talk about some of your short stories and what the listeners need to know about Allison Dickson.
Well, yeah, I did. I did start in short stories and independent fiction, mostly horror and some sci-fi. That was where I got where I cut my teeth. I grew up reading a lot of Stephen King, so I thought, I'm going to be the next Stephen King, and everybody thinks that in some way, shape, or form, or wants that. But I did release a novel from a micropress called, the micropress is no longer with us, but it's now with one called Local Hero Press, my book Strings, that came out in 2013. And that was my first time that I wrote something that kind of just takes place in the real world and not doesn't have speculative elements to it. And when I wrote that, I realized I think I found it. I think I found my calling as an author, where my voice felt the most at home. So, but that was still a little more horror-oriented. There were some pretty extreme elements in it, and I knew that was sort of a one-time deal for me as far as going that dark. So,
where do the distinctions lie? Like, where is that? Like something that would just never happen in maybe domestic suspense, where it's okay in horror, like. It seems like the lines get a little blurred sometimes. Yeah,
sometimes they do. I would have to say the level of violence and taboo elements are probably the bigger elements versus, in writing commercial fiction at all versus writing independently. You don't really have that break that you have to put on when you're writing independent fiction or independent presses. They don't necessarily say, hey, how about we tone this down a little bit? I kind of just threw everything at the wall and kind of vented my spleen with Strings especially. That was I don't know. I think it was in a dark place when I wrote it, and I went full throttle, and I realized through the course of doing that sometimes that isn't always what you want to do. There's an art to it, of course, but I think in learning that restraint and learning how to pull back a little bit and being able to express certain things without necessarily having to show everything that can possibly be shown or shock people, I think that was the thing right there, is going for the shock value. And I kind of still carry a little bit of that in me. But I often feel like it's easier when you're drafting a book to throw everything at the wall that you can, see what you can get away with. And then when your editors and your agent look at it, then maybe they come back with, some suggestions, and then you find a way to marry their suggestions with your sensibilities. But yeah, that was the pivot for me going into thrillers, was finding, getting more centered in the character and their like the finer lines, the sort of reading between the lines, getting into those subtleties, and while still maintaining that thriller structure, that pacing. That
the pacing is awesome. I mean, I couldn't put it down. I'm speaking with Allison Dickson. Her brand new novel is called The Other Mrs. Miller. So of course you want to know about the other one. The other one. The pacing is just exactly what you want. Which is why I don't want to put it down. Like, just one more page, just another chapter, just a little bit more. Okay, this part, and then the cake is gone. There's just crumbs.
I love that
bloody fork.
Yeah, I love hearing that, because I remember like where I found books that really get me that way. I read a lot of Sidney Sheldon, probably back in the day, and that man knew how to make you turn that page, and he had a way of doing it. And I honestly don't know if it's something. I don't think about it when I'm writing, but I do feel like it's just that trying to keep that immediate sense of keeping your goal right in front of you, and then there are times when I end up being one of those writers that has to go and stretch things out a little bit, because I do write very condensed in my first drafts just to get the whole structure out. I end up, and a little trivia note on The Other Mrs. Miller, every single draft that I turned in to my agent during revisions, and then the draft that actually went out for sale with when we put it on submission, was under 70,000 words. It was actually a 68,000 word book. By the release version,
interesting bit of trivia.
Yeah. The book that everybody is reading now is just a little over 90,000, I think, or right around 90,000. So we really went in there and dug deep.
Yeah, you did, because think about, that's what you submit, and that's what is, you're submitting around, so that's finished in essence. And then to add in any other trivia without giving anything away. How did you dig deep? Was it in character development, conversation? Did you add scenes?
Yes, absolutely. The whole aspect of Phoebe with her father's past discretions, sort of being a shadow over her life, that was added with the revisions with Putnam and with Spear. It was actually I had two editors working with me. I want my UK editor and my US editor. They both passed the manuscript back and forth between themselves, and we all kind of collaborated on it. So that was a fantastic experience. But that was added, and then a lot of the elements with the neighbors and why they moved there and all that, those their motivations. That was added in at the end, in that revision. The epilogue, the final epilogue, that was actually a last second add-in. So,
great
lot.
Little tidbits, and people will have to get a copy of The Other Mrs. Miller to know what Allison's talking about. And we are giving 3 copies away. You can find them on Reading with Robin on Facebook. Yes.
Yay.
I know. I love giving away books. It's so much fun. And visit Allison at AllisonDickson.com. You can also find her and her kitty cats on Instagram, because I was doing some sleuthing. But when the reader gets the book, this is all we know. And we know it's gone through edits and revisions and all that, but the things that you just shared.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but it really
the whole show's an interruption, Allison.
But they just turned me into, my editors and, really my agent too, because the whole process of getting it ready, this book was a completely different. The only thing that maintained from the very get-go when I started this book in 2014 was the central element, the twist, essentially.
Yeah, well, we can't tell anybody what.
And that was the main exploit. I wanted to do that thing, and that was the thing my agent and I agreed. This is the thing that will clinch it. But it was a completely different structure. It was different backstory, different point of view. It was actually the original draft was written half, alternating points of view between the husband and one of the other characters, the other female main character. So when we realized, like, as I kept rewriting the book and sending it to my agent, she was like, we're so close, but it's just not quite there. And then she brought in one of the other agents there, Sarah Bedingfield at Lieber Greenberg. She's fantastic. And we all sat down after she read through it. And we decided, no, we have to write from Phoebe's point of view, who opens the book. And once we realized that, we were off and running.
These are such amazing details about writing a book. And so many people that listen to Reading with Robin are writers. So it's also fascinating, the whole craft, but that you get together and, everybody's sort of tossing things back and forth, and you're trying to write like a reader. You're trying to think about how it's going to be, how the story's going to go. And then you almost want to surprise yourself with the twist, but of course you need to know what it is so you can write it.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine that's really tricky, especially in a thriller, domestic suspense, these types of books, because the story will hinge on that. So that's why I think I'm so hooked on the books that are fabulous, that I'm enjoying. And I know you mentioned, I think I read somewhere you talked about your agent is the agent who took Gone Girl on, right? Did I read that?
Yeah. She's Gillian Flynn's agent.
Right. So
Stephanie Roston, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So that's like, you shoot high there. There you go. So that's what I just am fascinated by, the creative ways that you authors torture your characters.
Yes. And I tell you what, every single time I came back to it, and I think I just found myself feeling like I'm revisiting these people that I know and finding new ways to ratchet things up for them and make it even more. And then when the editors get involved and they have their ideas, it's all a very collaborative process, but at the same time they give you the space to be yourself as the writer, they really respect your work. And so it isn't necessarily about, hey, we're gonna fix your book for you. It's more like, okay, here's the thing, and it really, I was just blown away all the way that they both had this belief in me that I didn't even have in myself at the time, but I found it. Like, I found the way to stretch myself that they needed me to, or that I needed to make this book something that I'm really proud of. When it went on submission, I honestly was like, oh, this is a fun book. It'll be fine. It'll probably sell. I was thinking, because the first one Stephanie tried to sell for me didn't sell because it was very dark. It had very taboo elements in it, but it was like a Southern Gothic with a kind of a visceral murder tale that we still hope to find a home for at some point.
You will.
But yeah, I think it is one of those books that I kind of had to be a known quantity before somebody wanted to try to sell it for me.
Hey, why, however it works. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I wrote this, I was like, okay, this is a good, fun, beachy commercial. Like, people can take this, on vacation. And that's kind of what Putnam saw. But then when we developed it more and it deepened more and it became a bit more personal, and I found that personal element for myself in it, I was like, okay, this is now not just candy for the masses, which is, what I was thinking. It's lighter than what I typically would write.
Right.
And so,
well, you're coming from your darker place, it's all there's a sliding scale of candy.
Yeah.
And milk chocolate and not dark.
People will say like, oh, this is funny, this is humorous, and I'm thinking, wow, I didn't know. I guess it kind of,
because there's a lot of humor. Yes, that's one of the things that I really, I could hear that voice, and so something. There was some real, a few times where I was like, oh my God, that's so fun. That kind of thing is very clever, and I was, chuckling to myself because, there's a lot of tension and page turning, and as I said, and we're talking about this brand new domestic suspense, Allison Dickson's debut domestic suspense, The Other Mrs. Miller, and find her at AllisonDickson.com. So those are the things that rang true to me. So I was, just so attached to this book, and I love Pullman, and they just churn out these winners. So that, when they send a book, I take especially take notice of their books.
I was blown away that they wanted it. So.
Isn't it so great though? Like I can hear the excitement in your voice. I mean, it's a really big deal, and that is, as a reader, as a writer, these are the things that are. They just add such a layer of joy to reading, because as a reader, when you hear these stories, and it just doesn't pop out like that, and
right,
and not that people might know it if they stop to think about it. Not everybody would think about it. You pick up a piece of fruit, and you don't always think about how long it took to grow, and all of this stuff. But you can sometimes be appreciative and take a deep breath and go, wow. So nice of Allison Dickson to write this book to entertain me. I should call her up and thank her. And here I am, calling you up to thank you.
The whole experience, and I will say this, the experience of releasing this book has renewed for me my faith in readership, because when you're in the process of writing something, and when you hang out with a lot of writers who are trying to get there and trying to get a successful release and trying to get the agent or the publisher, and you start to feel like nobody's out there, nobody's interested, nobody's listening, and they're going to release this book and nobody's going to read it, because you get in that mind frame, and it starts to feel like you're alone in the world. And then when the book started coming out, and I started seeing all the book bloggers and the early readers and all this, and rallying and posting pictures on Instagram of like the Bookstagram photos, and all this, and people talking about it, and the people on Goodreads just whether they slammed it or loved it or something in between, it was just like, oh my God, there are people out there just living for this stuff. And I'm like, I thought I was the only one who read books anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's so great to hundreds and thousands.
Yes, amongst a huge pile of readers that are just everywhere. I mean, because I'm immersed in it and I see it, and I can't believe, how many, people have always been reading, that's for sure. And I just always, I always have thought that, believed that, and have the numbers to back it up, but also because so much is available online, and there are so many communities of readers, and you see all of these people commenting and being so absorbed in these books that it's even more evident, because you can really see them. You can see these Goodreads posts and all these bloggers and bookstagrammers. So people are so excited by books, and you're right there in that sweet spot with the domestic suspense. So you couldn't be in a better spot. And
and I had no idea that was even a thing. Like when I wrote it, and then when we sold it, I was talking to a few editors before the book went to auction, and that was a whirlwind of a week, and I talked to that was crazy. I talked to 5 or 6 different editors, and all of them were saying, we're looking to fill out our domestic suspense list or domestic thriller. And that was really the first time I'd heard that term, because I found myself reading the books in the genre, but not really knowing that was a subgenre. I didn't know that name. And so I was just looking at, bestseller lists, or, people recommending thrillers to me that had, strong female leads that were set in, suburbs, or set in, was dealing with home elements, things that I, relate to in marriage. I'm always big about marriage and kids and, and all that, because that's my life. And so learning that and seeing like, oh, this really is a thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is and then so it makes me feel good, because me thinking that, my experience, I'm a stay-at-home mom for, 2 teenagers now. They're pretty much grown, but, thinking like, what am I bringing to the table in terms of my lived experience as a writer? Because I didn't have like this highfalutin career or anything that I, and oh man, all the praise in the world to the ladies out there working hard in their day jobs and coming home to write at the end of the day, because it's a lot, a huge responsibility. And, so I'm thinking, oh man, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a cop. I'm not, I'm not a reporter. I'm not, you know what I mean? So I'm like, well, I'm just a mom. I'm a big nerd. I like to eat and play games, and that's my life. So yeah, being able to go, oh, but I am married and I have kids and I have a crazy family, and what can I do to pull some of that and put it in, so that's where I come from, and
it's just,
and to know that other writers out there are doing it. So that's fun.
It's just what people want to be relating to in some way, so there are the elements of the story that people may or may not imagine themselves finding themselves in these sort of circumstances, but they love reading about it. And somebody said to me recently why women are so drawn to these. I'm not saying necessarily in this story because we'd never give away any plots, but somebody said that there's a strong need for women to want to kill somebody at some point.
Yes.
And so they just so connect with these domestic suspense. This genre is just rapid fire.
It's almost like you could think of like a Venn diagram of like a domestic thriller. With like a little bit of romance or, whatever drove women to want to read in droves like 50 Shades of Grey, like that escapism, that idea of, he's kind of not a great guy, but he's hot. And you know what I mean? So there's like this woman kind of living, and it's forbidden, and there's like a wrongness to it. And I think that there's that with the domestic thriller side. I think there is that, like I said, that overlap of readership there, that women, it kind of appeals to that break in the mundane. You go and leave your house every day. You go grocery shopping. You come home. You cook dinner. You do the thing. But what if something's happening next door?
Was a car parked down the street and somebody's watching somebody. So we haven't even talked about the story at all. I'm speaking with Allison Dickson, and which is fine. The book is called The Other Mrs. Miller. So set up the story a little bit. We, of course, nobody has to worry about giving anything away, especially in this kind of book. But who are main characters, and what do you want the audience to know?
Yeah, so we have Phoebe Miller. She is basically a down-and-out heiress type living in this very affluent suburb of Chicago, Lake Forest. And she grew up very privileged, and she grew up very insulated. But then her father, who is this major tycoon type, he passed away, and she inherited his fortune, but she also inherited his scandal, which is that he left in his wake a bunch of women who were mistreated by him over the years, and they're ready to come out and talk about it. And, in a town like Lake Forest, which I actually had the privilege of going to on my book tour. I went there before.
I saw you were there,
Yeah, and it really was fantastic. But it's a very small village, very quaint, very quiet. But at the same time, people know each other, people talk. And when something like that happens, if you're a prominent from this prominent family, you feel like you can't go outside. You don't really want to face the questions or the stares. And so this is the situation Phoebe is in when the book opens, except she's also noticing there's a car that's been coming and sitting outside her house every day for the last couple of weeks, and she's getting more paranoid despite the fact that her husband is telling her, this is not everything is about you. This thing about your dad will blow over. And, and she's grating her teeth because she and her husband are kind of, they're growing more distant. They, failed to have kids. They went through fertility treatments and everything, and she's done with all that. And he, but they aren't seeing eye to eye on the whole starting a family thing. So, it's bad enough when you're feeling trapped in your own home, or you don't want to leave your own home because of the outer gossip, but then you're stuck in your home with a husband that you don't relate to anymore.
Yeah,
and then
situation.
So that sets it up for Phoebe to just feel very easily distracted when new neighbors move in across the street, and they happen to have a very handsome college-age son moving in with them, who's a little flirtatious and a little, things started happening there, and Phoebe actually starts getting closer to the boy's mother as well. And as she's getting, more involved in the lives of this family, that car is still there watching, and Phoebe kind of takes her eye off that ball, and that sort of comes to her detriment. So, so that's the main setup is, all these elements colliding at some point near the middle of the book, and where it goes from there is just a complete roller coaster ride. So,
oh my God, it so is. I mean, I was thinking, like, how is this going to resolve? You know, of course, that's the question. How is this going to resolve? Where is this going to go? And it's such a satisfying ending, and it's the other Mrs. Miller. So, of course, you want to know who's the other Mrs. And then it's broken up into Mrs. Miller, and then the second part is the other Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
And So I don't like to guess too much. So I was like, you know, you try and sort of hold that part of your brain back and just enjoy the ride.
Right.
Yet, you know, and it speaks to, I must have read this book, it wasn't that long ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, but it was probably like 12 or 13 books ago. And I remember it. I remember the details vividly. And
awesome.
Yeah, and so that's not easy to do. They really stuck with me, and the whole, you know, I could just imagine the house and the neighbors move in across the street, and then that, of course, the things are not as they seem, and just the exchanges between the women. So Mrs. Phoebe is becoming friendly with the neighbor, and I just felt like there was so much suspicion, and we find out why, you know, who knows what. Again. Yeah.
Things are definitely like, you know, they start dropping those little hints, and I love that. I love getting those little tiny tidbits that kind of come in when you're, you know, as you're reading along, and you're going, this isn't quite what it's supposed to be, and you know, and so it kind of feels like watching an old Hitchcock movie. You know, and that was
like, don't
a
do
vibe.
That. Don't go there.
Yeah.
And the texting is wild, and the stuff that happens with the phones, and and who's like sort of second guessing who's writing this, or who knows what, and it's like double, triple, backwards.
Yeah, the interludes. Yeah, those are fun. That was actually the parts of the book that I spent the most time on, are these little short interludes that pop in, you know, between every few chapters, and you know, they're not very long. They're maybe a page or less, and they ended up taking hours to get right, and because they do serve as you know, they contain their own subplot, but there are also some where you have to conceal the identity of the person, and then so it was really
Yes, like, who is this? Who's speaking to us? What's happening?
And I was so worried because, you know, after writing it, and you know who it, you know, as a writer, you know all this stuff, but it's like they're going to see right through this, you know, because I know. And so it's so cool that people had no idea, or they didn't guess the twist. And I have some jaded people who, you know, they're like, I'll try to figure it out. And they're like, nope, I didn't see that coming. So,
I love that. I know. You just read it and enjoy. But yeah, I did not see right through that. I know, because I'm sure as a writer you think, well, there are only so many things, tricks that you have up your sleeve. I mean, but yet you slid them all out gently, and we didn't see them coming, and then it's like, wah. And I love sharing books like this, where I'm like, oh my God, you're in for a treat, and it's the other Mrs. Miller. It's Allison Dickson's debut of her domestic suspense. Now, is this book going to go? I never even asked this question, and again, left with an incredibly satisfying ending. But do we see these characters again one day, maybe, or some of them?
Oh God, I honestly would love to imagine. I have imagined a book beyond the end of this one, because it definitely has room for it. Mm-hmm. If there's ever demand for it, I mean, if
I can put in my
ever
order.
came to me, I would love that. I do think that it could, you know, become its own, you know, continued on world, because there are some, you know, you try to resolve things as much as you can, the immediate questions, you know, so that people don't feel, you know, but there are definitely things left out there that you just love to see come to fruition. And so I would be more than happy to write another book in that world and
I could
pick
even
up where it left off.
Yeah, or a prequel, actually. So we see Phoebe's upbringing, and what the father is fascinating, and the things that we learn about the father are just really fill it in and make the story just that much richer. So it's just a treat. It's like, do not miss this book.
If you enjoyed this clip, you'll love the entire interview. Just visit robincall.com and subscribe to RWR Salon, where you'll be able to listen to all full-length Reading with Robin podcasts. With your new subscription, you'll become a member of our Facebook page, where we give away tremendous books twice a week and post exclusive content. You'll also get an awesome book surprise for your birthday, and first dibs and discounts to your favorite Reading with Robin events. So, go to robincall.com and subscribe today to RWR Salon for the low introductory rate. We look forward to seeing you there.